Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, I guess, depending on where you are, and welcome to another live stream. This is the 30th live stream that I've done, and it's fantastic seeing already, just taking a look at so many people, regulars, etc., in the live stream. A couple of housekeeping things before we start. Remember that everything in this live stream is driven by the people watching live. So as people leave comments, questions, that will determine what is actually in this live stream. If you're watching it afterwards, which is fantastic, many people watch it afterwards. And remember, you can just skip forward if there's any question you know the answer to or are not interested in. So just checking as usual that I've got, it's all nicely working and it's live. I think it's all fine. I've put my glasses on, which probably helps. So first of all, for those of you who are new, perhaps you've come to the channel for the very first time, I'm Gary Bembridge. The channel is Tips for Travelers, and the goal of the channel is to help make it easy and fun to discover, plan, and enjoy unforgettable cruise vacations. And hopefully, I'm about to embark on another unforgettable cruise vacation. Tomorrow, I'm heading off on Saga Spirit of Discovery, which is an over 50s cruise line, and of course, I'll be reporting and that. So if you want to follow that cruise, of course, if you've got any questions, that would be great. I'll try and answer those. But if you want to follow that, I do post some stories, but it's probably here on YouTube. But I also post a story probably more regularly because it's actually a little bit easy to post them on Instagram, and I'm Gary Bembridge on Instagram. But certainly I will try and post about that whole cruise. Lots of people are making some comments already about the first of the videos that I put up following the Viking cruise. The first of those went up on Thursday night. And this one's really taking a look at whether it's enjoyable, fun, relaxing to go on a post-COVID shutdown cruise. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, perhaps you want to go and take a look at that a little bit later. Without doing too much of a spoiler, hypnotherapy for you. I do talk a little bit about the entertainment on board and how that probably wasn't really to my taste. And that was probably the only thing that wasn't amazing actually on it. I was in a minority. I guess you were in a minority too. A lot of people really liked it. So it was really interesting because Viking are innovative in so many ways, so many things they do, but the entertainment was very predictable. But I think, as they said, I think one of the things that we should probably expect is there's lots of restrictions around what can and can't be done. So it's going to be interesting as I go on more of these post-shutdown cruises to see how that gets handled. And I think I mentioned before, I actually have another 7, I think it is, of the shutdown cruises, a little bit obsessed, Saga being the very first one. So let's take a look at some of the questions. This one I actually don't know the answer to, which is what is casino rate? Now, what I'm guessing is, because I've seen a couple of people talking about this, is casino rate is where presumably high rollers, they encourage to get people on board and they give you some kind of rate because you spend lots of money. Now, I've had a couple of people contacting me about this whole casino rates, getting free cruises through casino payments. I don't know whether it's through playing in a casino. I don't know whether the cruise lines are ramping that up as they head back into sailing, but it's something that I will definitely explore much more. I'll try and see with some people I know in the cruise lines if I can find a bit more about it, because I would like to find much more about what's going on with that whole casino thing. I won't be able to find out on this current cruise because Saga does not have a casino. Viking also did not have a casino. Hetty's here, and it's great to see it. I just want to check something and make sure it's all flowing nice and running all very nicely. Yes, Hetty, it's very exciting. I am almost at 200,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. I think I'm probably, by the end of this weekend, maybe into Monday, we'll be at 200,000 subscribers, which is incredibly exciting. It's quite bizarre in a way that so many people do follow the channel. It's kind of quite sobering when I see that. So I'm sorry, I'm just checking that everything's working fine. It seems to work fine. The reason I'm double checking actually on both things is I know last week we had a bit of buffering with the Wi-Fi. The JM129, good to see you here again, always asks challenging questions. So that's good. More countries are opening their doors to vaccinated international travelers, but many still require COVID testing before flying, boarding a cruise. Isn't there a risk of ruined vacation? I agree with your sentiment there. I think one of the things we have to expect is, although we're getting really excited about things opening, these cruises starting up, Celebrity Edge doing its first full sailing. It's being billed as the first sailing out of the United States. There was a couple of test cruises happening, but this is the first full-on cruise sailing today. But you're right, these things are starting up and it's getting exciting. But there was a bit of a hiccup where there was some reports of crew testing positive on the edge. It went red by the CDC, then it was false positives. We've also heard on Celebrity Millennium where some unvaccinated younger kids tested positive. We've seen some of the some countries, for example, Malta. I'll give you an example of Malta. Malta has opened, it's now a green country, which means people can travel there without quarantine when they come back to the UK. However, Malta immediately then slapped on a quarantine for Brits going into the country if they were not fully vaccinated. So I think you're right. We are going to see some disruptions. Cruises started in the UK, supposedly calling right up to places like Scotland. Scotland decided they weren't going to let cruise ships call in, so all those itineraries had to be changed. So this cruise that I'm on tomorrow was originally called Scottish Islands and Highlands, and all the ports of call were going to Scotland. Now it all had to be changed. And now at short notice, we're now going to Portsmouth, ironically, which is where I started the other day. We're going to Falmouth, we're going to Portland, which I've never been to, which would be quite good because that's also in the bay where most of the cruise ships in the UK are kind of hanging out, waiting to go back into service. So I hope to get some good shots there. It's going to Isles of Scilly and it's going to Falmouth. So again, I think you're right. We're going to see lots of chopping and changing, and particularly, I think the JN129's point is particularly with this Delta variant growing. So we've seen in the UK case numbers are growing very highly. Hospitalizations, luckily, and deaths not corresponding. The vaccination's kind of broken most of that link. But we've seen Australia, for example. They've just gone into a full hard lockdown for 2 weeks, despite everything they're doing there. So I think we're going to see lots of those disruptions. And I think you're absolutely right. Also bear in mind, although with vaccinations, you can still obviously get COVID. So you might fail a test and you might be bumped off the cruise. So I think you're right. We're going to see lots of disruptions. One of the most interesting things is coming off the Viking cruise. I was thinking of booking one of the Viking cruises that's out of Malta. It calls on Italy and Spain. And so, but I decided not to do that for that exact reason, that I think there's just a lot of disruption. So keeping it simple is going to be really, really key. So Lou making the point, I stole his ship. So Lou was supposed to be on Viking Venus, and of course it all got cancelled for the UK sailings. Trying to find out what's going on actually with Viking, because they cancelled their repositioning from the UK to Malta. So trying to find out what's going on with that. So Jason asking, did you have to pre-book a test? I'm assuming that's been before check-on, or is that done at check-in? Jason, it's very interesting because this differs a lot, country by country, cruise line by cruise line, and so on. So it depends a lot on what type of test they're having. So for example, I'll give you a couple of examples how it's different of the cruises I've got. So what we had to do with Viking Venus is when we arrived, we actually went to our cabin and we did the test there. So all you had to do is you had to book an arrival time to get on the ship, and you went straight to your cabin and you did the test, and then they went and got the results, etc. So they were staggering people. What we have to do for Saga is we're asked to do a test at home. So in the UK, you get free, the NHS sends out antigen test, the rapid test. You still do the and the but you get a result very quickly. They say wait half an hour, but you can see the result within 5-10 minutes. You also do that before you go. Once you get to the port, and again, arrivals is staggered by time. So actually Saga are controlling it because they actually send the transport. Transport's included in the fare, and that's all staggered. What it says is once you get to the port, you'll stay in the car and someone will come out and do the test. You wait in the car for the results. Again, it's a fast result. Assuming that you are negative, you then get on the ship. Then go into check-in and do further screenings, temperature and the health screening and so on. If you test positive, the transport then takes you off back home to isolate. Now, what is happening is on Celebrity, for example, I've got the Celebrity cruise. What Celebrity are going to be doing, again, sailing out of the UK, is they've told us that I can't remember if it's 10 days or a week before the cruise, is they will send you a link to very specific places to have your test done, so that they will then, so you have to pre-book that test, and then they obviously will get fed the results as you do. So it differs a lot, line by line and country by country. It depends on those rules. So the checking of a test before check-in is mostly managed by the check-in time in practice. So hopefully that helps. So P North, I'm a new subscriber, so lots to catch on. Fantastic, great that you're a new subscriber. I think on the channel I've got something like 800 videos, so you do have quite a lot to catch up on. So with restrictions still in place in some countries, will cruise line insist on ships excursions only to go ashore? Now, this differs a lot, again, by country and by port and even by cruise line a little bit. So it comes out to the point that the JM129 was making earlier is you need to expect that this is going to be completely fluid. So what's happening, for example, in some of the sailings out of the St. Martin, for example, on Celebrity and others, they were able to, depending on what the port rules were, and some ports they were able to get off and self-explore. But in other ports, say Barbados, you can only go off on cruise line excursions. On the UK sailings, you can only go on cruise line excursions, certainly up until the 19th of July, when the country goes into stage 4, lifting of all restrictions, and then you'll be able to tour by yourself. And in Europe at the moment, most of the cruises, not all of the cruises, but most of the cruises, you have to do cruise line excursions, but it varies a little bit. So the answer is it depends. And very, very important is if you are going on a cruise anytime soon or in the next couple of months, check what the existing rules are, and bear in mind it could well change by the time you get on. So you need to be comfortable enough, in my view, to have to go on cruise line and excursions. So this next cruise I'm doing with Saga, it's all cruise line excursions only. So that's the only way that you can absolutely do it. Now I know there's been some answers. I think Lou's answered the question on the casino. Here we are. That's hypnotherapy saying it's a 3-hour round trip. So you've obviously seen the various places. Because my cruise on Celebrity is only in August. I think it is August the something, 17th or something of August. So I haven't seen that yet. So you're right. There's very specific things. So it's quite an ordeal. Then by the sound of it. So lots of questions. Let me go back and make sure that I'm answering the questions. I promised. I want to ask a question about Norwegian cruise lines. Let me go back and look at those. So lots of interest on the casino. We've obviously got lots of people very interested in gambling. I do like gambling on cruise ships. Like Las Vegas, etc. But I've never ever been offered anything complimentary from gambling. So I'm obviously not very good, not a very good spender from that front. So we've got very mixed things. We've got Texas, Puerto Rico. Beth, first time watching live, which is fantastic. Hope you find that helpful. So. And I'm trying to look. I'll find the cruise here. Here we go. Here's thank you very much. Garth has done a super chat. So thanks very much for that. Going on my first cruise in December after being cancelled 3 times due to COVID. Already planning our second, looking at a New England, Canada cruise. When is a good time to go? So Garth, that's very interesting. The New England, Canada cruise is a great experience, and I keep having them cancelled, unfortunately. And I haven't actually. I had it cancelled through in 2020, and it got cancelled again this year, and I haven't rescheduled it. The season for the England Canada cruises is relatively short. You'll actually find fairly limited options on those. The most popular time of all, when the rates are highest, is when you're heading into that fall period, because that part of the country is famous, I guess, for those beautiful oranges, etc. So you'll find towards, as it heads into fall, is a very popular time. I was really aiming to go the more July, August time, because I thought actually going when the weather was nice would be much more interesting, because you've got a lot of very interesting, islands and stuff to go, kind of cruising around and exploring and some active stuff. But certainly what people recommend is that end period time. You'll find there's lots of cruises. So for example, Cunard will normally run, and I think the P&O will normally run cruises that sail out of this is how popular it is. They run cruises that time of the year, fall time, which go out of the UK, cross the Atlantic, do that whole New England thing, according to New York, and come back. That's how popular. So that's really what I would recommend. Now, Adam's asking, any thoughts on the short 2 or 3 night? UK sailings this summer that would have reasonable solo traveler fares. And there is a massive issue, to be honest, with all of those sailings because they're not doing solo fares. I'm doing all of those with one exception as a solo traveler, and as I mentioned, I think 7 of those booked. Not one of them was I able to get a solo traveler deal on. So that is a real challenge. So certainly there's some great ones going, but they are for solo travelers at a pretty large premium. So one of the things you might want to look at is look a little bit later after the sort of the 19th of July when it goes into stage 4, when in the UK, when you've got lifting of restrictions because the capacity can increase. So for example, the Saga cruise was supposed to sail with 80%. Then going on, it's now only able to sail with 50%, but they're after the 19th of July, they're going to sail with more like the 80% again. And all the cruise lines are doing that. So you'll find prices are much sharper. So for example, I was looking at the Cunard cruises, which are in sort of July time, which is the one that we're doing. I was looking at one in September and I can see the prices have come down. The second thing I would do is take a look at a line like Marella, for example. Now, Marella is not a line that I'm that familiar with, but a lot of people I know really like Marella. It is part of, it used to be Thompson's Cruise, it's part of Chewy. They are much more of a value line. And I was looking today, for example, at Marella, and their fares are pretty sharp. And they're currently doing a promotion at the moment where you can get £150 off or £250 off certain cruises. So clearly they're discounting those. So what you need to look for is lines that are discounting. Princess Cruises also, for some of their cruises, I think it was in August, we're doing some promotions on certain of the cruises. They've introduced these sort of themed cruises. So unfortunately, as a solo traveler, you're going to have to pay the premium. So you need to kind of be a little bit sharp. Good idea would be, I guess, to work with a travel agent who might be able to do, to do some of that for you. Barbara saying, wow, so love your videos, which is fantastic. You have 4 Princess Cruises booked and just book a Viking Ocean River Cruise for 2023. So that's great to know that it's been very it's been helpful and great to know that you booked so many cruises. Tim saying, so this is Tim saying, having recently heard you mentioning people trying to smuggle hot plates onto a ship. That was in a video I did, which is kind of bizarre, but people do that. Kettle, maybe. I have to ask, why would someone do such a thing when there's wall-to-wall food to strange people? Tim, I guess it's one of the mysteries of cruising. I think some people, perhaps I guess, are less familiar with cruising or less familiar, or they just want to have their things around them. And I was never able to find out quite why, but you're right, the things that cruise lines confiscate is quite remarkable. I mean, those are more of an exception. The big concern that cruise lines have is more with things that can be used as weapons, and things that can, like candles and stuff. They're really, really strict on that, and booze, actually, they're very strict on that. So that Lou's saying, actually, Edge is still red. That's interesting. So I thought they had been taken off red. So that's good to know. Susan saying, we're cruising the Viking into the Midnight Sun next June 2022. That'll be an amazing cruise. Right up there to the Midnight Sun and to Norway and stuff will be amazing. Can you share if we need to worry about seasickness with being in an Explorer Suite? So Susan, Explorer Suites, I'm not sure whether you're in the very front of the ship or the very back of the ship with Explorer Suite. You're always going to get at the front of the back of the ship kind of more movement than you will in the middle of the ship. So so that's always need to bear in mind, you're going to have a little bit more movement just by the nature of it. And it's interesting because the premium suites are often in those locations, which I think in one of my videos I spoke about, where a ship architect once said, passengers and the lines want to put all the suites in these sort of spots or high up, and actually you should have them more midships and sort of about deck 6 or 7. That would be the most kind of stable part. But anyway, so answering your questions, you will definitely see more movement. However, at that time of the year in June, setting up to Norway, and again, storms and movement can happen any time of the year, but I've had incredibly calm sailings at that time of the year. But again, it's very unpredictable. Again, nowadays with things like stabilizers and stuff, I wouldn't be too worried, and just take some medication with you if you are worried, even just to stop yourself being inside. I wouldn't worry about it at all. You will have more movement, but I really wouldn't worry about the seasickness part. Butterfly McQueen, booked a cruise to Bermuda for next June. Have you ever been, and can you recommend excursions? I haven't been to Bermuda. It's one of the places that I have not been to. Some friends or some people that I know who actually are yachtsmen, they sail a yacht. That's the type of cruising they do, and they're actually in Bermuda. They were leaving the Caribbean actually to cross the Atlantic to go to the Azores and I think to the Canary Islands to escape hurricane season, and they actually got a little bit stuck in Bermuda for a couple of weeks. They had some problems with their yacht, and they have been raving about Bermuda and how beautiful it is. So unfortunately, I don't. I'm sure lots of people will have suggestions, and hopefully, if you do have suggestions, it'll be great. Pop those suggestions for Butterfly McQueen. Liz is asking now. I've been asked quite a lot of questions recently, actually, about accessibility, cabins, and the whole accessibility travel. And one of the things I've committed to doing is doing a video around it, but I need to do a little bit more work on this area. Particularly, I want to work with the cruise lines, and also there's a couple of companies that provide equipment for cruise lines, particularly for passengers who have other needs kind of beyond wheelchairs, that I think they would have some really good tips on. One of the things I would say, Liz, is all of the cruise lines are pretty good when it comes to wheelchair accessibility, so pretty much all of the lines are good, and pretty much all of the lines will have good accessibility cabins and have capability for wheelchair passengers. One of the things that clearly I have seen in talking to people that do have wheelchair accessibility challenges is the more modern the ship, the more likely it's going to have be designed with that in mind. So the more contemporary and modern ships. So if you look at some of the more modern P&O ships like Iona and stuff like that, they are just built with more I guess more thought, more consideration, also more regulations and rules around it. So they tend, they kind of build from scratch. Fred Olsen ships are a little bit more old, a little bit more dated, but they do still have accessibility. But my temptation is to focus on the more modern ships. So look at P&O, for example, they're more modern ships. Cunard, for example, although the ships are not massively modern, but they're pretty modern. They have really good experience with accessibility. Princess, Holland America, all those kind of lines. That's what I would focus on, rather than say Fred Olsen, which is a great line, but it is older ships. You've got, of course, they bought some of the old Holland America ships, but they're still slightly more dated, so they still have accessibility. But I think you'll find the more modern you go, also because on slightly bigger ships, they have slightly bigger cabins, often by definition anyway. So that's hopefully that's helpful. But I will do more dedicated stuff on that. So Annie and Kirstie asking, talk about getting shots. Do you take much camera gear with you when traveling? I do take quite a lot, and I try to restrict how much I do take, but I do take a lot. So what I take, for example, is, and hopefully you find this interesting. So I actually have one suitcase now. It's like an away case. It's a carry-on case, which is basically full of camera stuff. But I do take in there. I take a light. You can't see them here, but I take a light because I found that one of the most frustrating things is often if I want to film stuff, particularly in the cabin. So I take a full-on light. It's quite big. You won't be able to tell, but you can tell in relation to my head maybe. So it folds down. I take two cameras, two Sony A6 6400 cameras. So one I can basically have in my cabin, set up on a tripod. One I can have on the gimbal or on a smaller tripod to move around. So then basically I have one which I do to shoot around the ship, and one basically for kind of to camera. I also use, which is very, very helpful, take a little Osmo Pocket, which is a tiny little thing. It's about this big. I don't know why I'm doing this because you probably can't tell how big they are, but it's tiny, fits in your hand, and it's got a built-in gimbal. It's really, really good for, when the light's really good. It's very good outside, shooting in the wake of the ship. It's also quite discreet, so I use it a lot. Say if I want to video some stuff when I'm eating, or I want to video some shots of people and stuff. Thing is, if you get your camera out and your gimbal, people do find that a little bit intrusive. So I use that a lot, and I take my gimbal. Obviously, is what I've said. So and then on microphone stuff, lots of microphone stuff. So quite a lot of stuff. and it's got more as I've gone on. But I tried. What's been great with technology is cameras are getting smaller. So I used to take a Sony D70, but now I take a 6400, which actually shoots in 4K, but it's smaller. What I'll do one day is I'll take, maybe on this trip, I'll take a picture of the stuff that I do, so people know. So I do take a lot. Here we are. I took a while getting to it. Sorry about that, but there was a question. Around that I mentioned earlier that I was going to come to. I'm actually going to take a slug of my tea. So what is a good cruise for a 60-year-old parent who are new to cruise, are confused between Norwegian Cruise Line, Haven, or balcony in Celebrity? Is it like a 4-star suite versus a 5-star base room? So basically, if you're 60 years old, like me, 62, I would say almost all of the major cruise lines are great for people in their 60s. So actually, I would say in many ways, you've always got more choice if you're in your 50s and 60s and above than you've almost got if you're young, because there just are more lines and there's more likely to be passengers of your age, if you like. So certainly, you've got Cunard, Princess, Celebrity, Holland America, Viking. If you want to go upscale, you've got Seabourn, Silversea, etc. The ones that I would tend to shy away from, if you like, is once you talk about Royal Caribbean or Carnival or those little bit more boisterousy kind of things. Now, Norwegian Cruise Line is an interesting one, because Norwegian Cruise Line is very varied in that it is probably more of a more relaxed ship. So if your parents don't like dressing up, for example, they like really relaxed dress codes, and they like lots of choice of stuff. So lots of choice of, especially dining. They like to go and see more Broadway type shows, because Norwegian Cruise Line would have more Broadway shows than the more traditional review shows, for example. So Norwegian Cruise Line talk about freestyle cruising, which means lots of choice, pretty relaxed. So if they like a really relaxed thing, it's good. Now, let's talk about that. So Haven, what Norwegian Cruise Line have is, the Haven is kind of a ship within a ship. And in there you have the suites, you have the dining room dedicated specifically for suite passengers. You'll have a lounge, you'll have a bar, or they have a lounge, they have a bar, they have a little concierge desk there. And it's a nice little sort of enclave, if you like. It's got a swimming pool as well. So certainly if you're traveling in the Haven, you've got this little dedicated area, ship within a ship. MSC Cruises has a similar thing with the Yacht Club. Now, if you move on to Celebrity have, if you're looking at trying to have them as equivalent, they have suites and they have what they call the Retreat, but it's not quite as an enclosed space. So certainly if you're going on Celebrity and you go in a suite, you have a dedicated restaurant, and you have the retreat area, which has, again, space that only suite guests can go to, but it's not completely a ship within a ship. So balcony cabin, Norwegian Cruise Line would have balcony cabins, Celebrity have balcony cabins. So to compare the comparable of Haven, you need to compare suites. So if you looked, so for example, we were talking about earlier, if you were joined earlier, I can't remember your name, I'm sorry, but it was talking about going in an Explorer suite. So on Viking, their suites are called Explorer suites, but there's not a dedicated area for suite guests. There's not their own restaurant or anything like that. So that's the equivalent. You can't really compare Haven with a balcony on Celebrity. You need to compare a suite, and I think they now, if you look at the site, they bunch it as the Retreat. But again, you can go in a suite in Princess, you can go in a suite in Holland America, etc., etc. But the Haven is really interesting. So if you want them to go on something that feels kind of very exclusive and very special, particularly if it's a special occasion, the Haven is a very beautiful area. And of course, the advantage you have this nice sort of sophisticated kind of area, but then you step out of that little area, and on Norwegian, you've then got your Broadway show, you've got all those choices of specialty dining, gazillion bars, and the more relaxed dress code. So hopefully that's helped. If you're looking at Celebrity is probably going to be a slightly older crowd than you're going to find in Norwegian, which might have families, younger couples and stuff. And and depending on the ship, but it's pretty modern. So if you go on like the Edge, which we were talking about earlier, Apex, and certainly from next year Beyond, which looks an amazing ship, they're very, very modern ships as well, probably a little bit more contemporary. So hopefully that helps. So let's have a look. Francis. Now, Francis, I know, has been looking forward to the world voyage, if I am correct in remembering, Francis, and it's been cancelled. We've also seen, I think, P&O have cancelled their world voyages, and I suspect we're going to see many, many more world voyages for the same reason, for 2022 disappearing. So doing a transatlantic on the 14th of November, very nice. Caribbean disembark, and then the 2023 Sydney to Cape Town, very nice. So hopefully November. I think what Francis is alluding to is, or referring to, should I say, is Carnival. Cunard, I think just before last week's live stream, had cancelled a whole bunch of stuff, like Queen Victoria is not coming back into service until the 22nd of April next year, and it wiped out my September one. They are coming back. So I think you must be on the very first transatlantic, I think, Francis. So hopefully it's okay. A lot of it, of course, will hinge around whether the US is open freely. At the moment, as you know, their borders are closed. There's this task force going on. And I guess they're also choosing November because that is when the CDC conditional sailing orders completely disappear. You know, all the test cruises and stuff go. So hopefully that's going to be the case. And I guess it links back to the point that the JM1 channel was talking about. It's still a little bit unpredictable, but certainly we'll hope. Cheryl's asking a question which I get asked a lot, actually. I probably should answer it much more often, and people have different views, but I'll give you my view. So what is the best month to take an Alaskan cruise? Cheryl, I would say, first of all, any month that Alaska season is on is a great month to go to Alaska, because Alaska is fantastic. It's a really, really fantastic cruise. I'll tell you what I think, and I'll tell you also what other people think. So I have been in May, which I really liked. It's right at the beginning of the season. It's still early on. You can have a lot of rain, but your chance of having rain is not as great. My next one I'm doing, which is one that keeps getting bounced through, is actually in June next year. So I tend to like to go more at the beginning of the season, and sort of, you know, early on before the season gets really, really busy. However, if you really want to see more wildlife, particularly bears, it's worth going a little bit later into the season. So heading more into the July, August time, because what happens is once the salmon runs start, it's much easier to see wildlife. So in terms of excursions and so on, it's definitely much easier, more likely to come across wildlife. The thing I would say with Alaska is it's really hard to predict the weather. You know, so when you go to places like, I think it's Juneau and stuff like that, you know, they joke that they have, I think Ketchikan the same, you know, they have rain, something crazy. I can't remember the numbers, so don't quite be in the numbers. Something like 300 and something days of the year that could be rain. So it's very, very unpredictable. So just focus more on the destination, I guess. So I would say anytime's good to go. I like going at the beginning of the season, so I always go to the May, June time. A lot of people disagree with me. They say go July, August kind of time, because you're going to see more wildlife. So I probably haven't helped much there, but that's when I go. So I don't know if that really helps at all. Les, this is like the, you know, one of the things that'd be great is, you know, if I was good at predicting the return of cruising to Australia, and I knew I could do it, I could place a bet, that would be like being able to predict the lottery numbers. It's really, really, really hard to tell what's happening in Australia. As you know, I'm guessing maybe you are from Australia, or interested in Australia. As you know, they pushed back again the return of cruise ships. Clear Cruise Line Association, I think I did one of the previous live stream, I've been running a program to try and lobby, as happened in the US, the Australian government to allow cruise ships in. The Australian government is showing very little interest. It doesn't seem to be a lot going on. So I think it's a way off. And as we know, particularly with Australia, again, looking from the outside, with their kind of no COVID approach, you know, so they've got really stressed by this outbreak of the Delta variants in Sydney and St. Barons. I think the cases are up to 80, so it's quite a lot considering how locked down Australia has been. And, you know, they've gone to a hard lockdown. So I think people are quite jittery. So I suspect that in Australia, and again, this is just my view on observing, I suspect we're not going to see cruising returning to Australia for a while, because politically, the whole Ruby Princess issue, where people came off the Ruby Princess, and I think quite a high percentage of, again, don't quote me on this, but I think quite a high percentage of deaths were linked to the ship. I think politically it's quite a raw nerve. Opening the borders itself is a massive issue. So although the cruise lines and CLIA are lobbying extremely hard to get domestic cruising, as happening in the UK, for example, as happened in Europe last season, Australian passengers only, vaccinated crew, and so on, there is not a lot of enthusiasm, and particularly when borders are talking about borders being knocked down way into next year, it's hard to see. So the answer is nobody knows. Even CLIA are not even putting a timeline on it. I did see a couple of articles in the last week or two, again, just how there seems to be very little very little progress on that front. I want to pick up this good point, actually. Anton saying, my wife booked our Alaskan cruise for May 2022 and was cheaper than June, July, and August, but it's a bit chilly. So you're right, that was a good point, actually. Is you often find beginning of the season it can be a little bit cheaper. It'd be interesting to see, it's good to know that even for 2022 it's still cheap, because I had my fares kind of protected because it was moving, but it does tend to be a little bit easier. I mean, when I went in May 2018, where it was boiling hot, but you're right, theoretically it can be a little bit on the chilly side. So let's have a look. We've answered the 60 question. That's an we gammed the casino rate, absolutely. So is there a chance, so Shirley's asking, is there a chance you can get information on local boat tours on the Rhine and the Danube? Would be appreciative. So I'm not sure whether you're meaning specifically around river cruising or the more local tours. So there's two things that you can do. Obviously, the river cruise is the best one to do, and there are an enormous range of cruise lines. The most popular cruise lines, certainly with international travelers, are you've got Uniworld, you've got Viking is probably is the biggest. You've got Cross Sea Europe, Emerald, Scenic, and so on. Now you do have more local ones like Nico Cruises and so on. So that's the more traditional kind of cruise line. But you can also do kind of day cruises as well. So I've done some, and I actually have a video around that, which I'll try and maybe link in the notes afterwards, where you can just do it like a day cruise. So what I've done is I was actually doing a road-based trip along the Rhine, did some day cruises, but then ironically I went back 2 weeks later and did the actual river cruise, which was just so much better. So I don't know if that, I hope that was answering your question, but let's have a look. Lots of people talking about Alaska time. As I mentioned, there's a lot of diverse views around when is the best time to go to Alaska. And I think someone was saying they were going in August this year. So, which is fantastic. As I said, any time to go to Alaska is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic, really, really fantastic time to go. Here we are. Thanks. I'll come back to that. Ketchikan, it rains 300. I knew it was 300 and something. I didn't want to overclaim, but 350 days a year. So thanks for that. Matt, found your channel very recently. Fantastic. And I'm loving your content. Even better. I joined late, so apologies if you answer this. But do you have general advice or best types of cruises for solo cruising? Great timing, Matt. I have actually just updated all my stuff around solo cruising, and the video that's coming out on Thursday night, so I released a video Thursday, is all about solo cruising, and it's updated. So I do have a video which is out, or maybe I'll try and link it again in the notes, so because a lot of that still applies, and I've just done some other points on solo cruising. So the video coming out on Thursday is all about solo cruising. So I do have quite a lot of advice around that, and I look in there, so I won't spend a little time going through it now, if that's okay. But I look a lot at your different options, from everything from sharing the cost through to the best cruise lines that offer solo options, both the obvious ones and the less obvious ones. And then I look at also then how you can get around the supplement, the best way of getting around the supplement, and how I've done it and what my success rate has been. What I've also done, Matt, which will help you, and I linked to it in that videos, is I found it very difficult to find one resource which had all of the ships and the cruise lines which have solo cabins. So I've now developed my own list, and I linked in the video, which has all of the solo cabins. Certainly focusing as a starting point on ships that have solo cabins is a good place to start. The big watch out is most ships have very few solo cabins, with two exceptions, one of which is Saga, that I'm about to go on. Their Spirit of Discovery and Spirit of Adventure, 20% of the cabins are solo cabins, and they range from, they're all balcony cabins, so they range from balcony through to suites. So it's very nice as a solo traveler. You can then, range for that. However, it is a premium line anyway. And then you have Norwegian Cruise Line, which have, in many of their bigger ships, they have the solo studios. They are inside cabins though. So if you don't like inside cabins, which I'm not a fan of, so I don't choose those, they are the two lines that deal with it the most. And then list the other cruise lines that have solo cabins. The problem is you need to plan way, way in advance. So if you're a solo cruiser and you want to go at short notice, you will struggle to get a solo cabin. However, what I then do also in that video, and again, I linked to it, is there's a couple of sites that are really good at identifying solo cruise deals that are going at any point in time. So they come and go quite fast, but there's a couple of really good sites that you could follow. So Matt, watch out for that video on Thursday. It will answer much more. And if that doesn't answer those questions, and please, then come back and ask. Because one of the things I'm really interested in is answering lots of questions on solo travel. I travel a lot solo, as I'm going to mention before. I cruise 10 to 12 times a year because I'm very lucky because I can do that with my channels, and it's a good excuse to having the channel to go cruising. But most of those I go cruising solo because my partner works full time and comes on maybe one at a push two of those cruises a year. So the Cruise Show UK, and good to see you there. So David, if you want to know more about Viking, by the way, the Cruise Show UK was on Viking Venus. It was posted a series of videos, ship tour, the food, the drinks package, cabin, I think was the other one, I think. And then of course, watch out for my Viking ones to come as well, in which go into more detail. So what are you most looking forward to on board the Saga Spirit of Discovery? So that's a very good question, and there's a couple of things that I'm really looking forward to. Probably the most critical of those is just getting out cruising and sailing again. So it was so nice, and I talk about it in the Viking video the video I spoke about came out on Thursday, about just being back out at sea. So we've all got very caught up for all the obvious reasons around the protocols, the testing, the masks, no masks. Can we talk ourselves? Can't we talk? Do we have to book to dine? Can we dine? All those things, which are very important things, obviously. But actually, the most important thing was being out at sea. So that's the thing I'm most looking forward to. The second thing that I'm looking forward to is the ship itself is a very beautiful ship. So Saga, as an over 50s line, has a reputation, or an image, should I say, no reputation, of being a little bit old-fashioned, being a little bit fuddy-duddy, because people assume that, and they assume the ships are quite old-fashioned. This is a really contemporary-looking ship, and it's a very beautiful ship, really nice facilities, really nice rooms, and some really, really nice restaurants. There's some specialty restaurants, particularly an Asian restaurant that I'm really looking forward to. And the other thing that I'm looking forward to is there's quite a few people that I know actually on the cruise, so I look forward to catching up with those people. But I think probably just the ability to sail again is key. Just being back on a really nice, kind of really, really nice ship is key. And then the dining. So they have, the two I'm looking forward to is the Asian Fusion, which is really nice, called East to West. And the other thing I'm really looking forward to is the club with Jules Holland. So they have a partnership with Jules Holland, and I'm not sure that, I don't think he's going, well, maybe he is. Maybe it's a surprise. He will be on the ship, but he doesn't play on the ship that often. But he curates the entertainment in the club, and it's the steakhouse, and they have some sort of entertainment as part of that. And I'm really looking forward to that. Really, really nice from that perspective. So that is what I'm really looking forward to enormously. So wow, let's see how I pronounce this one. Theo Farastus, Theophorastus, thank you very much for the super chat, very kind. Please address Windstar and Clean Tahiti. What news there? Okay, now Windstar. For those of you who don't know Windstar, Windstar is a small sort of premium ship. So I always think of Windstar as being like Azamara, Oceania, and Windstar I see together. I also sort of put Viking in there as well, although Viking is harder to put in there. I really, really, really like Windstar. Now, what Windstar have is they have a couple of sailing ship types, and then they bought three of the seaborne ships, the smaller ships. But what they've started to do with those, they've cut those in half, and they've extended those. And the Star Pride, I was just looking at some pictures this week of Star Pride, which looks absolutely beautiful. I was on Star Pride when it was Windstar. Really nice ship. So they're kind of small ships. They're pretty intimate ships. It doesn't, like Oceania and Azamara, doesn't have big glitzy production shows. It has some singers. It has really good food, really good sort of informal but good service, really comfortable cabins, and they really focus a lot on destination stuff. So they now have really been updating a lot of their ships. And what I've seen, now, don't quote me on this exactly, but I have seen that they are heading back into and restarting in Tahiti. So Port Gagan and Windstar are due to start up next month, I think I'm right saying. So they are looking to start again as Tahiti, etc., is unlocking. But certainly Windstar is fantastic. Now, what Windstar do is there's, so you've got 3 lines that spend, already dedicated on that Tahiti, French Polynesian area. So you've got Aranui, which is a cruise line that I really want to try. So Aranui is 50% cruise ship, 50% supply ship, and it goes all through the Marshall Islands, I think they're called, and stuff, with a slightly longer route. And they are pretty much the sole lifeline, the sole provider of supplies and stuff between the various islands. But then they have half of it as a cruise ship. Now they are actually building a cruise ship themselves, which is more cruise ship, which kind of ruins the idea. But anyway, but they are really interesting. So they spend, they're just based there. Then you've got Port Gagan, which is owned by Ponant, which they've just revamped all the ship, and that's coming, as I mentioned, back into service. I've done that cruise, and it's amazing. Again, they focus mostly on the Society Islands, a little bit further, but again, out of Tahiti, phenomenal cruise. And then you've got Windstar, who then position one of their ships there for a season. Then you've got other ships coming in out, but those are 3. So definitely, if you're heading there, looking at one of those 3, and Windstar, really, really, definitely highly linked up. Highly thought of. Beth, sorry, good point. Beth's making us. I forgot to talk about whales. I don't know why I spoke about Alaska. I forgot to mention whales. I was focused on bears. So you're right again. That's why people tend to go that sort of July, etc. Time. Darlene's asking a question. This is probably linked to a little bit of upsets that happened this week, where a lot of people were dissatisfied. What's going on with Norwegian Cruise Line? I've had 2 cancelled, but rebooked, one in 2022 and 1 in 2023. Sorry, doing my slurping. Someone once told me off that when I slurp, I just remembered, when I slurp, you can hear it in the mic. So someone once told me off in a message, so it was good to know that you're hearing me glugging away. So what's going on with Norwegian Cruise Lines? So Norwegian Cruise Lines, they're still working through the process of bringing ships back, and it ties to a point that I guess was made earlier with the question from the DJM129, I think I've got that right, asking about is obviously should we expect lots of disruption. So they've just cancelled 4 ships, sailings, including Pride of America, etc., etc. They've cancelled their itineraries as they work to reschedule and plan ships back in that fit with the test crews, the vaccinated, the different regions, etc. So that's what's happening with Norwegian Cruise Line. It's really just their ability to get ships back manned, approved to start sailing. So a lot of people were very unhappy because they'd had been rebooked. So a lot of people are doing, I think like you're doing, Darlene is pushing everything into 2022 and 2023. It's very interesting because when I look at my schedule, is pretty much all of the cruises this year are completely new cruises. All the cruises that I had in 2022 are actually happening in all the cruises I had that were in 2020 that got cancelled, they are all now in 2022. So the Baltics, Alaska, a Viking cruise in the Med, and so on and so on and so on. They were all moved to 2022 because it just got too many cancellations, too many chops and changes. And I got a lot of flack at one point. I brought a video earlier on saying, like, don't book 2021, move your cruises into 2022 where there's more certainty, and wait for new cruises to come along in 2021. And that's kind of what happened. Now, the one cruise that I have, which has moved, which is still in 2021, is Antarctica, which I was talking to the agent that I booked that through, a company called Polar Routes. And they are, we think it's going to happen. And I watched a webinar with Ponant. There's still a lot of uncertainty around Antarctica. Antarctica is closed to visitors at the moment. But of course, cruises need to go in and out of Antarctica, in and out of Argentina. A lot of them will fly to Chile, use a charter flight to Ushuaia, but you need to come back in. A lot of them will go from Ushuaia to Buenos Aires. So lots of uncertainty around whether Argentina will be ready for that. So anyway, it's a long way of saying that, you know, I'm seeing, I guess as you're seeing, Darlene, is a lot of those cruises are, you know, moving into 2020, 2022, 2023 ends up being the reality. But the good news is, of course, we've got lots and lots of new cruises coming on. So that's option. I mean, we see that in the US as well, of all these various cruises coming on and suddenly kind of popping up around the place. So Tim saying, if everyone waits until 2020, these companies may no longer exist. Tim, I think it's not necessarily true. The reason being is that what's happening is it's not so much about not booking anything with those cruise lines. It's around, if you have a specific cruise like Alaska, the Mediterranean, or I guess Lou was doing something like, you know, he was talking about the Baltics and stuff, is move those into 2022 because that's when they're going to happen. The reality is that's going to happen. However, to your point, Tim, is like I have booked, I now have for this year, I have booked 9 or 10 cruises, I think it is now. Now, admittedly, some of them are shorter than original. So you know, because these are brand new cruises. So I think Tim's right, is, you know, it's not about not supporting the cruise lines. It's about accepting that when the cruise lines are going to have to offer new cruises. So if you look at Viking, come back to the point that Lou was saying earlier, is Viking have all these cruises that they hadn't planned. So they're now in Iceland. They have 2 ships in Iceland. They've got 2 or 3 ships in Malta. They're now in Athens. In Athens, you've got now Holland America seaborne sailing there, or Caribbean sailing there, and so on. So these were not planned at all, but they have now put these in place. And so I think that's the key, is shift and wait and book. It's more around planning, I think. Hopefully that was, I don't want to say that, like, don't support the cruise line. So hopefully that didn't come out the wrong way, is I was saying. So I think someone has asked, Anton said, I would love to go on Antarctica cruise. I heard there's nothing like it. And Anton, you know, Alaska. Antarctica, you know, people ask me, what is the most incredible place that I've ever been to on a cruise? I would say it's Antarctica by a really long way. I mean, Alaska's fantastic. The Arctic, fantastic. You know, the Mediterranean, Caribbean, Iceland, these are all absolutely fantastic. But Antarctica is just completely and utterly different. And also, although we have the sense that lots of people go to Antarctica, I can't remember the stats exactly, I need to look them up again, but there's still relatively few people do go to Antarctica. And I was listening to 2 things on Antarctica. There was a seaborne interview with Clear in the UK, the guy who runs seaborne excursions, specifically expeditions. And there was a webinar I watched, which Polar Routes, who I booked my Antarctica through, with the Ponant guy who runs the Antarctic expeditions. And they made the point that when anyone goes to Antarctica, because obviously people want to go, is all of them talk about how they're kind of almost changed by that experience, because it is so alien. It's so, I'm going to not say bizarre, it's so different. I'd expected what I'd expected, and it was nothing like I expected. And just the wildlife you see, and these penguins everywhere, and whales and ice, and it really is quite magnificent. So absolutely, you know, it's really expensive. and it's a little bit, it is really expensive to go, but it is definitely worth it. Save your pennies and go and get that piggy bank going. Hetty is heading off to Antarctica in January 2022. Very nice. Hetty, who are you going with? I feel like I should know that. I feel like you've told me that, but who are you going with? I know there's a couple of people like Bob. I don't think he's here today. Is going on Seabourn as well. So Kathy's making the point about Canada. This is a very interesting point. I've been touching on it for a while. As you probably know, much to many people's surprise, is the US did pass a law, whatever it's called, bill, which basically gave an exception to the Passenger Vessel Services Act, which has been in place since the 1800s, which requires ships going out of the US port to call in a foreign port to not have to do that to go to Alaska this particular year. And that's because Canada had closed their borders and said no ships coming in until 2022. And, and places like Vancouver, Victoria, get an enormous amount of trade coming out from the Alaska. Most of the many Alaska cruises, I'm sure it's probably the majority, actually go out of Vancouver, and a lot of them go out of Seattle. Now, there's lots of concerns that the US will permanently do that, because there is someone, bizarrely, someone landlocked senator has introduced a bill to make it more permanent to the US. That may be more of a struggle, that they don't call on Canada, have to call on Canada to go to Alaska. Now, one of the big issues that we're watching on that particular point is that specific exemption for this year for cruise ships to sail to Alaska without calling on a foreign port, and they're going out of Seattle. The law specifically, there's a little technicality in the law, which says that it's under the CDC's conditional sailing order. So ships that are under that process. Now, as we probably know, the Florida governor has sued the CDC, saying that they've overstepped their mark and wants the whole conditional sailing order set to scrap. The CDC point, and he's actually won the first round of that so far. The CDC have made the point that actually ships sailing to Alaska, that whole season is theoretically, anyway, at risk, because the bill specifically relates to the conditional sailing order that's in place. So if they have no jurisdiction and that gets wiped out, theoretically, the bill that allows ships to sail to Alaska without calling on Canada also becomes kind of null and void. Now, I'm sure that'll all get solved, and that's just kind of a little bit of aside. I think also the point that Tim made here is, there are some very beautiful ports like Vancouver. Victoria is a magnificent place to call. So it's not only just an economic and a legal thing, but there are definitely, there are some very, very beautiful ports. Duncan's saying we're scheduled to go on Norwegian Cruise Line for Antarctica in February 2022, but it looks like we can't get off the ship. It's limited to ships with less than 500 passengers. Change to the line that allows this embarkation. Duncan, this is a really important point. I touched on this in some of the Antarctica videos that I did when I went in 2019. But you're absolutely right. There is some very strict rules under the Antarctic Treaty, I can't remember the full name of the treaty, which limits the amount of people that can actually go on land at any one time, and also off any particular ship. So what you'll find is some of the bigger ships will do sail-bys, which are very stunningly beautiful still, but you can't actually do landings. Now, so that's why you'll find most of the expedition ships will limit the number of passengers to 200 passengers, because that allows them to do the amount of sailings. So definitely, if you want to do the land-based things and get out and actually get onto Antarctica, definitely look at going on a ship in the smaller size, which will allow you to do that. So certainly, that's why I went to the Silver Sea one. I'm doing Penant this time, but you're right, there are many. There's Hurtigruten, there's National Geographic. There's so many other lines that do that smaller the smaller size. And I'm a little bit I'm a little bit with Beth, which I've lost. Monica Silver Gary's cruise on. Yes, it's very good. Thank you very much. People answering the questions. So I lost. Here we are. Beth P514, Antarctica's best on expeditions. So I think I'm a little bit in that camp. I know everyone's not in that camp because it depends what you're looking for, I guess. But I'm in that camp. if you're going the way to Antarctica, stepping on land is amazing. Because one of the things that is phenomenal is we got told, you must stay, was it 9 feet? I can't remember the number, 9 feet away from the penguins. But of course, what happens is the penguins didn't get the memo at all. They didn't hear about the 9-foot rule. And penguins appear to have no fear of humans, I guess, because humans are not a threat. Their threat is when they get in the water. Their threat is from the seals, which attack them, and the threat to the seals is the orca whales, the whales. So actually, when you're on land, the penguins are really comfortable, and they come all scattering around you. So obviously, one of those things, getting out and having the penguins around you and scuttling around you, or the seals and stuff, being able to go relatively close to those is really amazing. So definitely think about that. So Ron's asking, when did you go on the recent Viking cruise? It was 2 weeks ago. I got back 1 week ago, and penguins rule, and penguins didn't get the memo. They absolutely didn't get the memo, which is great news. So one of the reasons I have now, the reason I booked the other cruise is I want to go from goes to some of the Falkland Islands, goes to South Georgia, which is where you have those massive colonies, 250,000 penguins. I'm going in November, so during the season, so weather may be problematic landing, but keep our fingers crossed. It happens when we land. But yeah, it's amazing. So Chris is asking, can a vaccinated US citizen fly to London Heathrow on the way to Paris for a cruise? At the moment, that is a challenge because anyone coming in has to do the quarantining. However, that is changing, I think, relatively soon. There's that task force at the moment, but certainly people coming in do have to quarantine. And my understanding is that applies even for some of those transfers. But you double check on that whole thing. Wow, an hour has gone by already. Hopefully, I've managed to answer as many of the questions. I think I've answered most of them. As usual, I will take a look at the questions. If I haven't answered questions, I'll try and answer them next time, or in some of the other channels, or on the community channels, community board, which a lot of you I know follow. So as I mentioned, I'm off on a cruise tomorrow. It actually gets back on Saturday morning. So I will run a live stream next week. I will try and do it on Saturday. I will certainly post on Saturday. If not, it will be on Sunday, but I should get back early enough, as I learned, because we get off the ship pretty early. So I should be able to run it on Saturday. So assume it's Saturday unless you see otherwise. So thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate everybody joining. Hope you found this helpful. And for those of you who are sailing, happy sailing. If not, happy planning sailing.